Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to World of Warships with still guns. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to World of Warships. But today we're not going to really be focusing on the gameplay and the background, which is, for your information, my first ever game in the Tier 7 premium British battleship, the Duke of York. You've probably noticed that this gameplay is a lot clearer. It's very, well, crisp. And that's because it's not actually my recording. There is actually some guy on the Russian server who takes replays from the official Warships replay site and records them. Literally, you don't have to send them to him. He just does it himself. So that's cool. I've got some other games that I've ripped from his YouTube channel, and I'm not really sure if that's copyright, but then again, this is my gameplay, so if he wants to sue me, he can do it. Whatever. Anyway, today's topic is not, as I said, not about this game. It's not about the Duke of York. I'm going to be talking about another British battleship that has yet to appear in the game, and that is the HMS Vanguard. HMS Vanguard, of course, the first of her class of nuclear ballistic missile submarines, and wait, no, wrong Vanguard, sorry. HMS Vanguard, the last British battleship, the last battleship ever constructed for the Royal Navy. This ship is, well, it's kind of a weird one. You see, it's a post-war design, so, well, it's not really post-war, it's more of a during-the-war design, but it came along during the post-war period. Let's just talk about this ship for a second. The ship itself, the hull was kind of like an improved King George V class. It took elements from the Lion class, but if you look at pictures of the Vanguard, you'll probably make more associations with the in-game Conqueror. Seriously, go look at a picture of the HMS Vanguard, and then take a look at the Conqueror from, of course, World of Warships, the Tier 10 British battleship. The two are virtually identical, except, of course, the Vanguard has different turrets, different guns. That's where one of the problems with the Vanguard, though, its guns. But we'll get on to that in a second. So, what we essentially have is this sort of Tier 9, Tier 10 battleship hull. So, that poses a problem, because its guns are sort of Tier 6, 7, Tier 6.5 almost. They're the same guns that you find on the Warspite, the Queen Elizabeth, and the Hood. And you know, they're decent guns at Tier 6, but as you go higher up the tiers, they start... well, they start being less and less effective. To start with, they don't exactly have the best shell velocity. That means, at longer ranges, those shells get really slow. You see, with the Warspite at 16 kilometers range, those shells work pretty damn well, but on the Hood with 18 kilometers range, it was actually kind of difficult to aim at max range. And you know, you're not supposed to be really shooting at things at max range, but that's one of the things I tend to do. And I can tell you, at max range, you need to lead a lot more than you would on the Warspite. Not to mention that Tier 9 ships are more than capable of resisting those particular guns. The breech-loading Mark 1 gun. Of course, you start to question why the Vanguard has these ancient World War I vintage weapons. Why didn't it have the sort of 15-inch Mark II guns that the Monarch, the sort of King George V prototype, would have had? There's a simple answer, really. It's that everything about the UK was pretty fucked up after the war, and we didn't really make any of the newer guns. But we did have 8 of the older models just lying around, and those guns were taken off the Courageous class battle cruisers when they were converted into aircraft carriers. Each of those battle cruisers had 4 15-inch guns in 2 twin turrets, and you know that once would have been some pretty serious firepower for a battle cruiser. But these particular 15-inch guns, somewhat obsolete by the end of World War II. Still powerful, still useful, but ancient. As not to mention that these particular guns had been lying around for 20 years, just doing nothing but rusting. So what we have at the moment is a Tier 10 Conqueror-esque hull with Tier 6 Warspite-esque guns, and we don't even know what version of these guns we're gonna get, because you've got the Hood versions, this sort of Hood Queen Elizabeth version with a 150 millisecond fuse time and rubbish Krupp on the shells, and you've got the Warspite versions which have standard 300 millisecond fuses and much better Krupp values. Will it get one of those, or will it get something entirely new? We don't know. So, yeah, Tier 10 hull, Tier 6 guns, and then you get the pretty Tier 10 anti-aircraft array. Vanguard, like the Conqueror, and basically every British battleship from Tier 7 to 10, will have the same 8 twin 133mm guns, these 5.25-inch guns. Very weird guns. A secondary battery, and it's also going to have like a whole bunch of these British Bofors mounts, and basically Tier 10 Conqueror array of anti-aircraft firepower. Now, before the British battleships came along, that sort of firepower would have been quite difficult to balance, but now we know how they balance the British anti-aircraft. Very powerful array, but seriously, you take a single 3-inch shell from a Smith-class destroyer and you lose 80% of your anti-aircraft mounts. That's literally how it works. So, what tier, then, would the Vanguard appear at? Well, I think it would fit in at Tier 8. For various reasons. You got this Tier 10 hull, of course, so that provides you Tier 10, at least Tier 9 survivability, if you're using sort of the Conqueror hull. Conqueror has around the same amount of hit points as the Friedrich de Gross, which is a Tier 9, but yeah, differences. Oh, quickly going to the game here, I've literally just messed up the chance to get a double strike. Yeah, right here. I fired those front turrets when my rear turret was 13 seconds from being reloaded. If I'd waited a few more seconds, I would have got a double strike here. Shit. Anyway, back to the Vanguard. So, Vanguard would have at least a Tier 9 hull. Though I reckon it would probably have much the same hull as the Conqueror. So, you're going to have a Tier 8 battleship with around 80,000 hit points. That's a lot for a Tier 8. So how do you balance that? Well, the Duke of York here has a standard British heel, but it gets less charges. So like, it's a standard heal pretty much, but it's got the same number of charges as the super heal, which makes it a little less survivable. So I reckon that would be what you do with the Vanguard. Don't give it a super heal, give it a standard heal with less charges, and that would balance the Vanguard pretty much. The AA, it can keep the tier 10 AA, but because the AA mounts die so easily, you wouldn't really need to do much balancing. The real problem is the guns, because you've got these tier 6 guns pretty much that are going to be out of their depth at tier 10. Like, imagine taking the Kawachi into a tier 10 battle, and that's kind of what you're getting. It's really... they're not the best guns. So, what is wrong with the guns? Well, we don't really know what kind of shells they're going to get, but let's say that they're going to get the sort of standard British thing, and they get 150 millisecond fuse time, and they get... well, they're going to have better crop values in order to actually compete at tier 10. So I think that the shells that the Vanguard fires should be a lot closer to the Warspite's shells. Like, they'll have the same 150 millisecond fuse time as all the other British battleships, but they will have the same crop values, if not better crop values, than the Warspite, which is at tier 6. That should increase the capabilities of those shells in a tier 10 battle, because remember, this is a tier 8 ship, it's going to see tier 10 battles. Another thing is the range. These, as I mentioned, these shells are going to be pretty difficult to control at 18 kilometers range, and 18 kilometers is kind of the longest range that these shells can achieve realistically in the game anyway. So what you'd need to do, I think, is add the supercharge to the shells. And this was a thing. These British 15-inch guns, they did have a thing called a supercharge, which increased the muzzle velocity and also increased the range of the shells. So maybe we'll get a bit extra damage from that as well. These supercharges were only ever really equipped to the Revenge class battleships, as these had the old Mark I turrets, whilst other ships, like the Warspite, had Mark I star turrets, which had a greater... they had more elevation angles, which meant that they didn't need the supercharge, they could use a standard charge and still get more range. And the hood had Mark II turrets, which were basically just Mark I star turrets that just looked better. So these, it's not inconceivable that the supercharge could be used on something else. So I think that the Vanguard would probably, more than likely, benefit from this supercharge, as it really would need it to increase the muzzle velocity of those shells from 731 meters per second to at least 750 meters per second. That should also increase the range to at least 19 kilometers, which would be pretty workable. The other issue concerning the guns is their relatively slow rate of fire. Remember that these are World War I vintage guns, which means you've got these massive breaches that you have to sort of unscrew and then move and swing out of the way, and whilst I think the Iowa has something a lot simpler, and there's a lot more automation in an Iowa as well. So with this sort of 30-second reload that these guns are going to have, it's going to put the Vanguard at a disadvantage, which isn't good because it's got less guns that will almost certainly do less damage than the Roma, which has one more gun, but just somehow better guns at the same time. So at the same time, I think you'd have to artificially increase the rate of fire by about 4 or 5 seconds, make it 25, 26 seconds, and then Vanguard, I think, would fit in pretty well at tier 8. Of course, you're totally free to disagree with anything I say. I'm more than willing to hear your feedback on my reasoning. Let me know if I don't know. Just let me know in the comments. Like, make it known to me, please, so I know where to improve. I'll leave you with the rest of this game now. It was pretty fucking fantastic. The Duke of York is basically just the King George V, if slightly worse, and I love the King George V, so Duke of York was a perfect fit. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you in the next one, folks, and until then, good night.
Affirmative.
Battleship destroyed.